Welcome to part 1 of the Takom M29 Weasel build. The best aspect of this build is that the bottom with the suspension and the top with the driver can be built as two completely separate sections. This way you don't have to handle the frail suspension half while working on the rest of the model. This first video will be the suspension half. The Takom M29 Weasel kit showed a lot of promise as a fun little vehicle build. I did another Takom kit previous to this and had no issues. However, this kit turned out to be very challenging and should not be attempted by a beginner. While we get started with the first parts to assemble to the main tub, the warnings for this kit are numerous. Primarily, the suspension is full of very small tedious parts assemblies. Many parts get launched when cutting them off the sprue, dropped and never found, are so frail that they break when fitting. Keeping that all in mind, we will go forward. Cleanup of the mold lines and flash is mandatory for these tiny little pieces. Even the smallest flash or mold line can prevent proper fit on a build this small. This process has the most potential for breaking or losing the pieces while they are getting cleaned up. We'll start with some of the pieces from page 1 of the directions. A narrow foam sanding strip or needle file are the best tools to get the mold lines and flash cleaned off. I'm not going to show the cleaning for every part in this build, but essentially every part needs to be cleaned up as the fit tolerances are unforgiving. There are two letter A sprues with the suspension and tracks. Luckily for me, that piece I launched bounced off my light stand, or it could have been lost in the carpet. Parts A37 and A38 are keyed and need to be sure to attach to the proper side of the build. Using some tape to hold one side of the cleaned up A and B assemblies from page 1 in place, it's much easier to position the internal shaft and other side of the assembly. The A and B assemblies are slightly different, so be sure not to mix them up. The A and B roller carrier mounts are very tiny, but the assemblies do fit into their recesses once they are cleaned up. Clean up and attach all 8 of the A22 pieces to the tub. Add the A14 springs to the A17 perches that I have already installed here. Position and seat all of the A20 road wheel springs, then glue into place. Remove the pin bumps inside the A21 parts that mount to the leaf springs. These pieces often break off when you try to snap the pins into the springs. A needle file works best for this. Installing the drive sprocket is a critical step that is not clearly indicated as critical in the directions, and is easy to overlook and cause massive problems later. When mounting the drive sprocket, the splines must be clocked into the exact position shown in the directions or the tracks will not mount right. Make sure the splines are in the right position when installing in the next step. For me, the most difficult part of this build were the wheels. The bogies are hair thin and don't take to thin glue very well. I highly recommend getting this pack of polystyrene from just about any hardware store to build some wheel jigs that will make this process easier and far more accurate. Take 2 of the strips, cut their lengths in half and make 2 T-tracks. Just lay one piece on its edge in the middle of the other half and glue in place. Make sure the pieces are straightened if needed, before gluing. The thickness of these T-tracks are perfect for these wheel assemblies. As they are built and placed on the tracks to dry, this will prevent the wheels from wobbling around left or right or cambering over. Once you have two sets of wheels on the back of the bogie, set the half-assembled wheel assembly on the T-track to dry. The thick glue is what I found best, as it doesn't wick onto the bogie and track, and holds the wheels onto the delicate bogie parts nicely. Once all the half-assembled bogies are dry, go ahead and do the front wheels for all the assemblies and place on the track to dry. Once dry, you can then glue the A21 piece over the pin on the side of the bogie. Then attach the A19 piece to the pin on the other side of the bogie. Once in place and you stop swearing at the A19 piece, squeeze the pieces together to tighten up the assembly and position the A21 piece in its vertical position. Complete all 8 assemblies and let them dry on the rack. Once dry, place all the wheel assemblies on their leaf springs. Line everything up with the drive sprocket and other wheels. The directions are not clear which side of the wheel assembly faces out, so if you have trouble lining up with the other wheels, turn them 180 degrees on their leaf springs and check the center alignment. Once lined up and all seated on their leaf springs, add glue to fix them all in position. When the wheel assemblies have fixed into position and dried, then place the arms into position only after checking every single one to make sure they are cleaned up enough to fit, or you will break them. You will likely have to slot the top of the A21 piece with a strip of sandpaper or hobby knife to get it wide enough. The sides of the upper arm bracket piece will also likely need thinning to fit the recesses in the tub. The arms stick out beyond part A21, and I confirmed with many reference photos this is not correct. I trimmed off the extra length to match the correct assembly found in photos and videos. I wanted to paint and slightly weather the suspension part of the build before they were blocked by the tracks. I use a spray of olive green instead of olive drab, as colors do fade in the field. Fortunately, my sanding foams fit perfectly inside the tub, so I can attach it and not have to handle the delicate suspension as we go on from here. I recommend mocking up some sort of handle like this so you aren't grabbing the suspension as you work. This isn't going to be a masterclass on mud, but I wanted to have a little bit of mud and dust effect applied where it would be impossible to get to later. We can do the overall weathering on the whole kit once the second half is done. I use a dark German gray instead of black on the wheel rubber because black is too black. This isn't Spinal Tap. All rubber starts to fade out in the elements and black stands out too much. Once all the rubber is done, I do a dry brush steel or silver where the track and guides meet the metal wheels. A very light dry brush on all the contact points is a good place to make it look like the paint has worn to the metal. It doesn't have to be overdone. For the tracks, I like to paint them in assembly order as shown in the directions. Lay them out as indicated on page 3 of the directions. Once on tape, I use a metallic steel spray for the tracks. Spray the tracks with the inside guides down first, then once dry, flip them over and spray so the insides of the tracks dry last. Since this is the side impossible to get to once mounted, I want to add accents and weathering to the inside of the track side before installing. I first use a rust wash that settles into the tracks. Vallejo Wash FX does a good job of getting into the recesses and cracks. Once the rust wash is dry, again we do a dry brush steel or silver on the track guides and any parts that contact the wheels. Attach the A28 sections as shown on step 3 and make sure they are up against the drive sprocket splines. Let each side's piece dry before moving to the next. Position each subsequent piece and let them dry before moving on to the next piece or you will have a ridiculous mess. Continue with the end pieces that go around the ends first. Keep working on the ends until you have just the A32 pieces left. Unfortunately, you will find this piece is too long and need to be shortened. This is one of many fitment issues on this kit that need addressed. Some use a little saw to section pieces of the A28 track out, or section out a piece of one of the shorter sections. I found good results by using some emery cloth to bevel down one end of the piece. You can also angle the sanding if you need to line the track up with a crooked connection if needed. The shortened end looks pretty smooth and seamless once done. It definitely passes the good enough test, and I doubt anyone would catch one link being shorter than the others. Now that everything is dry and a little bit of appearance work on the outside of the track was done, it feels like a good stopping point for part 1. Since the second half of the build can be done totally separate from the first, we will do the rest in part 2 without having to handle the suspension assembly.